bang, bang. With me, your man, Louie Tee. Welcome to this Louie Tee Network exclusive blockbuster deal in the National Football League as the Houston Texans pull off a trade to acquire wide receiver Stefon Diggs from the Buffalo Bills in exchange for 3 draft selections, 1 this year, 2 in next year's draft in 2025, 6th rounder this year, and a 2nd rounder next year in 2025, and in addition to that, a 5th rounder in 2025. I talked about the Texans, and we're going to talk about this trade from both aspects, from Buffalo's side of things, from Houston's side of things, what it means, the impact that it has, the ripple effect that we could potentially see here with this year's draft, specifically with the Buffalo Bills. Remember, the Texans have already traded out of the first round of the 2024 NFL draft, allowed the Minnesota Vikings to come back into the first round. So you're looking at a situation, and we talked about this on the podcast. I want to say it was 2 weeks ago or so, right around the start of free agency, the tampering period, when the Texans were very active. They were aggressive. They traded for Joe Mixon. They signed Danielle Hunter to that big deal. What we later found out was Danielle Hunter turned down more money from Indianapolis to go to Houston. He's from the Houston area, so that makes sense. But it also shows that they're going for it. And we talked about it, and I said they were very aggressive, were the Houston Texans. And what they've effectively done after what C.J. Stroud showed them last year, and we have no reason to believe he can't duplicate the success he had a season ago. Now, we can't be certain that he's going to duplicate that success, but we have no reason to doubt that he can. They're going to try to maximize this window, and this is what you're going to see more teams in the NFL do if the success happens this early. Year 1, he hits the ground running. They win the division. They win a playoff game. They advance to the divisional round. They give the Ravens a run for their money for about 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters or so before the game gets away from them. But what it tells them is, hey, we're a lot closer than we think. Now, they did sneak up on people last year, and that element of surprise won't exist this year. We'll see how they follow that up for an encore. But I'll tell you this much. If C.J. Stroud is what we think he is, and we have no reason to believe that he's not what he showed us last year, and you get Tank Dell back from injury, obviously Nico Collins had a breakout season last year. You now add in Stefon Diggs to that mix. You re-sign Dalton Schultz. You bring in, and yes, you do lose Jonathan Grenard, but you replace him with a guy that is 10 times better than him. No disrespect to Jonathan Grenard, but we're talking about Danielle Hunter, which is a premier NFL sack getter, right? This is a quarterback bagger we're talking about here with double-digit sack seasons to back up that claim. And so they upgraded the edge rusher position. This is a team, I love their secondary. It's young, it's vibrant, it's talented. They've got a young coach that came in and really rejuvenated that franchise. They didn't lose their offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick. As a matter of fact, they gave him more money and secured his services for at least the next year, possibly 2, depending on how things go. We'll see. He could get a job next coaching cycle. But the bottom line is they're set this year, right? And this is the thing. This is a year-to-year league. You can't ensure that you're going to have a shot next year, the year after that, or the year after that. Having a top-tier quarterback gives you a shot to be in that discussion. It gives you a chance to be a triple P, as I like to say, a perennial playoff participant. However, you don't know what next year is going to bring. You don't know if somebody's going to get hurt. You don't know if a rash of injuries is going to hit your team. You got to go for it when you can. And this move right here by the Houston Texans screams to me, we're going for it. And I said it this offseason. And you can go back and watch that video, that podcast episode. I want to say it was episode like 403 or something to that effect, 402, 403, where we talked about the Texans in particular. And I said, they're going for it. And I couldn't have forecasted this trade and what it was going to mean and how they were going to continue to go after it this offseason. But clearly you could see that they were going after it. And this trade just hammers that point home. They play in a division that is as wide open as any in the NFL. Obviously, the Titans made some upgrades to their roster. Still don't think they're ready to compete, but you never know what can happen in this league. Obviously, this league is set up for parity. Clearly, the Texans are a great example of that last season. Jacksonville started out like gangbusters last year, fell off a cliff. We'll see if they can rebound. And then who knows what the hell is going to happen with Indianapolis? You know, we don't know what they're going to get out of their second-year quarterback, Anthony Richardson. So that division is as wide open. They feel like it's theirs for the taking. They won it last year, and they're going to look to duplicate that success this year. And they've taken all the steps, all the measures necessary to put themselves in that position to do exactly that. And this move screams, hey, we're here, we're serious, and we're trying to compete and contend. And we think we can compete with the big boys. We think we can go out and do something other teams don't think we can do. And we've gone out and hired the guns to go and do it. Danielle Hunter on a 2-year deal. Diggs here probably has, 2 or 3 years left on the contract he signed with the Bills. So this makes a ton of sense on the side of the Texans. Again, you go for it here. All of these guys, all of their money comes off the books before you have to pay CJ Stroud. So you're going for it in this rookie window that you have with CJ Stroud. I love it on the part of the Texans. Even the Joe Mixon deal, all of that money comes off the books by the time you get to CJ Stroud. So they put themselves in a position to strike while the iron is hot. You know, the AFC is a very competitive conference. As we know, all of the big boy quarterbacks reside on that side of the bracket. However, as we saw last year, injuries play a part in this thing. You never know what's going to happen. And so the Texans find themselves right in the middle of this AFC arms race, if you will. And they've put themselves in a great position to compete at a high level with this last acquisition of Stefon Diggs. We'll come back to the Texans and what this means for them. But, you know, going over to the Bills side of things, and I just want to go and look at something real quick. So just to hammer home the point of what this deal was, Bills, I'm going to read this. This is an article written by Adam Schefter for ESPN.com. And there's something interesting here. And there's been this back and forth with Buffalo, and we're going to talk about this as we get to all of the aspects of this trade from the Bills' perspective. And it reads, this is an excerpt from Adam Schefter's article that he wrote for this deal being done. And it reads, the Buffalo Bills are finalizing a trade to send 4-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Stefon Diggs to the Houston Texans for draft pick compensation, sources told ESPN's Adam Schefter on Wednesday. The Bills will receive a 2025 second-round pick via the Minnesota Vikings in exchange for Diggs, a 2024 6th-round pick, and a 2025 5th-round pick. So obviously the crown jewel of this trade for the Bills is that 2025 second-round selection. The Texans acquired the pick from the Vikings when they traded their 2024 first-round pick to Minnesota last month. So as I talked about already, the Texans have already traded out of the first round this year. They acquired a second-round pick from Minnesota for doing so, among the other picks that they were able to secure. And they traded this pick away. And if you're the Bills, you're thinking in your mind, Minnesota has a chance to stink this year. Now, we'll see what happens with them trading up in the draft, potentially to get their hands on one of these top 5 quarterbacks in this draft class. But should they not be able to secure a trade to get their hands on one of the top 4 quarterbacks, and they end up missing out, or they have to take one of these second-tier guys, a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix Jr., we don't know if they're even interested in those quarterbacks or not. Whatever the case may be, if they have to roll with Sam Darnold, who they signed as a free agent in free agency, they're probably going to suck this year. And if that is in fact the case, then the Bills are smiling ear to ear saying, yeah, that's going to be pick 37 or pick 38 or pick 39 in the draft. It's going to be one of those high-level second-round picks that feels like an extension of the first round. So that's kind of the thought process behind this trade. However, this is an interesting part right here at the end, right? The trade comes a day after Diggs responded to a social media user's declaration that he wasn't essential to Bills quarterback Josh Allen's success by replying, "You sure?" Apparently, they're about to test that theory right now as they trade him away one day after he asked the question, "You sure?" The Bills are like, well, let's find out. Shall we? Let's find out. Clearly, he did not have a strong finish to the season. Coincidentally enough, during his stretch where he struggled, the Bills got hot, ended up making the playoffs, and Diggs really was a non-participant in those playoff performances, had a massive drop in that loss to the Chiefs on a beautiful rainbow 65-yard throw by Josh Allen. So maybe they look at him and say, you know what? He's not worth all the headache anymore. We're paying this guy all this money, and we could do so much more with that money. They signed Curtis Samuel in free agency. He's going to be a great compliment, but they need a number one wide receiver because Curtis Samuel is not, I repeat, not a number one wide receiver. Gabe Davis, who I think they were disappointed in last year, moved on to Jacksonville in free agency. So that's another guy that's no longer there. You did see the emergence of Khalil Shakir last year, especially during that playoff run and towards the end of the season. He stepped up in a major way. That's a good sign. They're going to need him, but they need a number one receiver. They don't have one currently on the roster, which is why we're going to have the discussion that we're going to have here in a second. But something that I always chuckle at is how fans can be so far off. The thing that I think we get wrong the most is trade compensation, okay? We always think this is what a guy is worth. This is what we can get for this player. Fans throw around trade ideas all the time, and they think they know, but they have no idea what the compensation really truly looks like. This was a month ago on social media when there were rumblings and grumblings that, Stefon Diggs might be available, and the Texans were a team that their name popped up. And this was on social media floating around, right? And this was the trade proposal. Who says no, right? And this was from DraftKings, FanDuel, excuse me, who posted this. Who says no? Texans receive Stefon Diggs, which is what we just saw. Bills receive 2024 first-round pick, which they did not get a first-round pick in any draft, fourth-round pick in 2024, and a fourth-rounder in 2025. This is a great deal. Obviously, if the Bills were to get this proposal, trade proposal, they would have jumped all over this. Clearly, they did not get this. They didn't get a first-round pick at all in this process. They didn't get a fourth-round pick. They didn't get anything even close. They got a fifth, a sixth, and a second. So this trade isn't even close to what they ultimately got for Stefon Diggs. But this is what fans do. This is what people do because we think we know, but we have no idea. Usually the trade compensation is a lot less than what we have in our minds. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I find it funny that, people felt like I bet you a lot of Bills fans felt like if we trade Stefon Diggs, we're getting a first-round pick. Not exactly. Not exactly. But in any event, I'll tell you this much. This deal is interesting for the Bills. And you know what I found somewhat alarming? And I brought this up to you guys on the podcast, was because someone had asked me about Stefon Diggs. They had asked me about the Bills and whether he would stay there, would he be traded? And I didn't think he would get traded, but I said I wouldn't rule it out, but I didn't think he would get traded. But you know what I did bring up in that same conversation? I said, you know what I found strange is Brandon Beane, Bills GM, was on the NFL scouting combine. And that's when a lot of these conversations first start, is at the scouting combine. Everybody's there. Conversations are had. Trade ideas are thrown around. Conversations are started. That's when you start to, kind of get a feel for who's available, who's not, and who's in the market looking and sniffing around a potential guy like Stefon Diggs. And Brandon Beane, I feel like this was unsolicited, but Rich Eisen is messy, so he might have brought this up, but it felt unsolicited by Brandon Beane when he brought up, everybody wants to talk about Stefon Diggs and he's fine and he's not going anywhere and we're excited about what Stefon does, brings to the table, yada yada yada. It felt forced. It felt like a guy that was on the fringe of pulling a trigger of getting rid of him, but wanted to make it seem as if everything was all good and okay. It sent off bells and whistles in my head, like, maybe they're sick of this shit. They're fed up. Every year it's something else with Stefon Diggs, and they're ready to move on. And then what made it a lot easier? In past years, when there would be some kind of hiccup with Stefon Diggs, all you had to do was just point to the numbers and go, look, this guy was first in the league in catches, yards. That was like 3 years ago. Led the NFL in just about every statistical category. 2 years ago, he might not have led in catches, but he was right up there in yards, or vice versa, might have been right up there in catches, not up there in yards. But, third in yards, second in catches, etc., fourth in touchdowns. It's easy to just say, hey, we can deal with the headache because this is what he's providing for us. Last year, it's easy to kind of say, you know what? We had to deal with this shit in the offseason last year. We don't feel like dealing with this headache. We got enough shit on our plate. We're going through a little bit of a transition anyway, offensively. Gabe Davis is no longer here. We brought in Curtis Samuel. We need some more money. Obviously, the Bills could use a little bit of financial breathing room because they had to give Josh Allen that deal, and you knew things were going to change at that point. They're still paying Von Miller, which I didn't know if they were going to continue to do that. They did restructure that, but still, he hasn't provided you anything since you got him, but that's another discussion for another day. The bottom line is they can use some of those resources elsewhere, and this deal frees up some space for them. It gives them some maneuverability. And speaking of maneuverability, you got to replace him. We can talk all the shit that we want about what he didn't do at the end of last season and how after like week 8, he had no touchdown catches or all that good stuff that we talked about last year at the end of the season and how his production fell off and he didn't have a 100-yard game after week whatever. Yeah, all of that is relevant. But he's still Stefon Diggs. He's still a guy you got a game plan, and he's still a bona fide number 1 wide receiver in this league, which you currently do not have. So that leads me to my next point. Doesn't this mean the Bills are drafting a first-round wide receiver, like definitely drafting a first-round wide receiver? Like, doesn't this mean that they're drafting Brian Thomas Jr. or they're drafting Adonijah Mitchell? Or doesn't it mean like they're drafting Adonai Mitchell from Texas? Doesn't it mean they're drafting one of these types of receivers? Or could they be trading up? Now, I've said this in the past, and I love when I see this happen because generally sworn enemies don't help sworn enemies. However, I've said this in the past many a times. The draft makes bedfellows of sworn enemies. Meaning, hey, if the price is right, I may hate your ass, but for today, for right now, we can be friends. Let's do business, right? And we saw that a couple of years ago with the, I want to say the Eagles and the Giants, or the Cowboys and the Eagles, or the Cowboys and the Giants had a little trade in there into the top 10. I think somebody was sitting at 10, somebody was sitting at 13, and then we had a trade there to move up to get a guy that they wanted. Can't remember which team it was, but we see that often in draft. Hey, I hate you, right? And the feeling's mutual, but for the right price, as a wise man once told me when I was a kid, everybody's got a price, okay? The Jets said, hey, we would love to move off of number 10. We don't have any use for 10. If somebody else does, hit my line. We're not drafting a quarterback. We'd love to move back, pick up some picks, see what we can get. If I'm the Bills, I'm sitting there at 28. That's a long way back. Now, this is a deep wide receiver draft class. I know. But if you're going to move on from Stefon Diggs, shouldn't you try your hardest, your damnedest, to try to get up and get Josh Allen the number 1 wide receiver he needs, he deserves? You go to 10 where the Jets are, you're guaranteed. I'm going like George Foreman. I guarantee you're coming away with one of the top 3 targets in this draft. And there is a wide gap between the top 3 receivers, which is Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors, and the rest of these receivers. Yeah, it's a deep draft class, but the rest of them don't look like those first 3. You get to 10, I guarantee you're coming away with one of those 3. You get one of those 3, you pair them up with Josh Allen, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir, and the 2 tight ends that you have. Look out, okay? Now we're back in business, and we're cooking with some gasoline if you're Buffalo. I mean, Adonai Mitchell is nice. He's cool, but he's not Malik Neighbors. He's not Rome Odunze. He's not Marvin Harrison Jr. You're not getting Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. However, 10, excuse me. You're not getting him at 10, but you can get one of the other two potentially at 10. All I'm saying is look out for the Bills as a potential team looking to move up in the draft to go get their guy. You go get you a top flight NFL wide receiver that you'll have under contract on a rookie deal for the next 4 years bare minimum before you have to pay him. You could get Justin Jefferson-like production out of one of these 3 guys, pair him up with Josh Allen, and all of a sudden the Bills are right back in that conversation as one of the best teams in the AFC. Now, you could still get a really good receiver at 28, not move at all, sit there and chill and just wait and see how the board falls and take what you perceive to be the best receiver. It's not going to have the same impact. I guarantee this, as it would be if you take a couple of picks, you just got a second rounder, take that second round pick, to hell with it, right? Package that bitch up, package up some other picks, and you take your ass up to 10 with the Jets. Go get you one of these top flight receivers. Just a suggestion, all right? Just a suggestion. We'll see what happens. Ultimately, this damages the Bills. Until we see what they replace Stefon Diggs with, this damages their chances of being a top-flight AFC team, okay? Because without a top-flight wide receiver, you go way down the list, okay? Now, we've seen the Chiefs orchestrate their situation without a top-flight receiver, but they got Travis Kelce and they got Patrick Mahomes. No disrespect to Josh Allen. I love him to death, and I'm one of his biggest supporters. I'm a Josh Allen stan, but he's not Patrick Mahomes, okay? And oh, by the way, that Bills defense, as we saw last year, not the Chiefs defense, and they don't have Steve Spagnuolo on that sideline, just in case you were wondering. And the Bills had a little bit of and they probably needed a breath of fresh air defensively, no more Tre'Davious White, no more of the safeties, right? They needed to hit the refresh button, right? They did re-sign one of their safeties that played well for them. The one that they got, Taylor Rapp, who did play well for them last year. So there will be a little bit of continuity, but they got some work to do the Buffalo Bills. But for me, it starts on offense with them, and they got to replace Stefon Diggs. And so that whole conversation about Josh Allen doesn't need Stefon Diggs to be successful, we're going to find out now, aren't we? It's a lot easier of a transition if you're Buffalo, if you go up to 10. And again, we're assuming the Jets are willing to move back with the Bills. Assuming that is in fact the case, or any team for that matter that's willing to move out of that top 8 to 12 range, if you can find a potential suitor, because that's what it's going to take. You're going to need to get somewhere in there, because with all these quarterbacks that we're talking about, and the likelihood is that we're going to see 4 quarterbacks probably go in the first 6 picks or so. All right. That's realistic. And if that's the case, if not two of these receivers are going to get pushed back. The guy that seems like he's going to fall the furthest back potentially is Rome Odunze. All right. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors aren't going that far down. Somebody's going to say, hey, that's enough. We'll take you, right? One of them is going at 4 to Arizona if they don't trade out of the pick. Presumably, that's the prevailing thought. And the Chargers, after trading away Keenan Allen and moving on from Mike Williams, you would assume that if they're not getting out of there, everybody wanted to mock them a tackle. You can get one of them tackles later. You already got a top flight tackle already that you drafted in the first round a few years back. So you don't really need to get one of these boys in the top 5. Go get you one of these big time playmaker wide receivers. So you're thinking right there, 2 of them could be gone 4 or 5, boom, bang. However, after that, other teams, edge rusher, corner, tackle, other teams are going to probably be probing around in other areas. You could get to 10 potentially. And if you're Buffalo, you probably need to wait. You don't need to make that trade now. You don't do it blindly, because guess what? You get to draft night and all 3 of those receivers could be gone by the time you get to 8. And now you got egg on your face. So you wait till draft night. But I'm telling you right now, after that 9th pick is turned in, if Rome Odunze is still on the board at number 10, after that team turns their card in at 9 and it's not Rome Odunze and the Jets are officially on the clock, you need to be the first team that hits their line, you need to already have a deal in place. Hey, if our guy's here, is this a good deal? Can we get this done? Don't let anybody slide in and take that opportunity from you. It's going to take a lot, because not only are the Jets probably going to be looking for some serious compensation to move that far back, you're also the Bills, and they hate you, and you're in the division, and it's family business, and you know how this goes. So they might tax you a little bit on the back end of that. So be it, okay? This is an opportunity for you to win a championship, go get you a high-level receiver. If I'm the Bills, that's the kind of thought process that runs through my brain with all of this. This is a big move for the Texans, though. Again, I'm dying to see what we get for an encore with C.J. Stroud. He burst onto the scene last year. The defense played well. They added, again, a big-time pass rusher in Danielle Hunter, opposite of the reigning defensive rookie of the year in Will Anderson Jr. And so you feel like you've got a tandem now on the defensive line. You've got some really good linebacker play, and with DeMeco Ryans coaching those boys up, we saw the linebacker from Alabama step his game up last year and really play at a high level. You did lose one of your linebackers in free agency to the Minnesota Vikings, but you'll be fine, right? You've got enough stuff there. And again, I think DeMeco's ability to really get the most out of linebackers, as we saw last year. Blake Cashman played his best football of his career last year. I don't think it's coincidental that he did that, right? I don't think that the rookie from Alabama came in and played the way that he did and had the pick 6 in the playoff game. I don't think that was by happenstance. That wasn't coincidental. I think this is the effect of a DeMeco Ryans. So you probably can draft another guy and feel good, but at the end of the day, the Texans are going for it. And now the Bills, if you ask me, if C.J. Stroud is what we think he is, because again, Nico Collins played like a number 1 wide receiver last year. This is what they thought they were getting from him when they spent a 3rd-round pick on him. You know how I feel about Tank Dell. If he comes back and is anything close to what he was prior to the injury last year, add in Stefon Diggs. Are you kidding me? That offense is as dynamic. They brought back Noah Brown. Who cares about Noah Brown? That's scary, because Noah Brown had some massive games last year. Some of the best games of any receiver in the NFL last year. Some eye-popping numbers Noah Brown put up in a couple of games last year, right? So he's your 4th option after this deal. So you've got to love what the Texans have done remodeling this offense. They're going for it. Clearly, they added a big-time piece defensively. Their secondary is super talented. This trade, if I'm being honest, elevates the Texans over the Bills if C.J. Stroud runs it back, circles the block, and does exactly what he did a season ago and ups his game to the next level, barring the Bills, and this is where the Bills have to counter this, barring the Bills, like Josh Allen's that dude, but trust me, 2 tight ends, Curtis Samuel, a rookie wide receiver that's not one of the top 3 in this draft. And again, who knows? You could get, again, a Brian Thomas Jr., you could get an Adonai Mitchell, and one of those dudes ends up coming in and being the next Justin Jefferson. Remember, Jefferson was drafted like 22 overall, right? Like 22nd overall. So it's not like you have to get a guy in the top, but this is different. This is different. This draft is different because the top 3 receivers are ridiculous. And we already know what those guys are going to do. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. The margin of error for us being wrong about these guys, very, very wide and vast, okay? There's no way in our minds we think those top 3 receivers aren't going to turn out to be studs in this league, no matter who's tossing them the football. So, in my mind, if you're Buffalo, you got to do something drastic. You just did something drastic by trading away your best player on offense, not named Josh Allen. Go replace him. Go for the gusto. I mean, I know you need some of those draft picks to kind of replenish some of the guys you may have lost in free agency. I say you go for it. Anyway, I think this is going to be a fascinating developing situation. The Texans are going for it. I think they have elevated themselves in the AFC pantheon. If, and it's a big if, and a wise man once told me, if is the biggest 2-letter word in the English language. I get it. But I don't think it's a stretch to look at what we saw from CJ Stroud last year and look to expect that again. I don't think that's a stretch. And if you're Buffalo, you got to replace Stefon Diggs. You say you don't need him. Josh Allen doesn't need Stefon Diggs for his success. Okay. They may not need Stefon Diggs, but you need somebody. Curtis Samuel ain't it. I can tell you that right now. He's really good. And he'll be really good in the capacity that you brought him there to be if you go get a true number one wide receiver. One thing I hate doing is relying on a rookie wide receiver to save the day. Not that it can't be done, and we've seen it done many times over, but boy, do I hate relying on it. The Bills are in Super Bowl win now mode, okay? Boy, do I hate relying on a rookie to come in and have to save the day when I'm trying to win a Super Bowl. That narrative changes if you go get one of the top 3 guys in this draft. Question is, will one of them be available at 10? I think Rome Odunze will be. The next question is, do you have the stones to go up and get him? If the Jets are serious about moving out of the 10th pick, which I think they are, do you have the stones, the gall to go up and get him? We'll see. Fascinating deal. Let's see what you guys think about it. If you're out there and you want your comment to be read, use the hashtag LouieTeeLive. We'll take a couple comments. We won't be up here a whole long time, but we'll take a few comments. But the fastest, most efficient way to ensure that your comment is read is to super chat. So King of the Bluegrass is up first. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, LOL, teams aren't putting up with players' BS these days, huh? Hashtag see you later. It's a lot easier to put up with a player's BS when he's producing massive numbers. Let me pull out my mobile device here and let's look at Stefon Diggs' numbers over the last 3 years, because there's been a steady decline, which you would expect. He's getting older and teams are keying in on him and et cetera, et cetera. Things are changing in Buffalo. They've added tight ends. They've been become a bigger part of the offense, and teams are trying to take him away. And so you would expect there to be, a little bit of a drop off, and he's getting older, right? But 2020 was his first year in Buffalo. 127 receptions, which led the NFL. 1,535 yards, also led the NFL, and eight touchdowns. 2021, not as many catches, 103. No one's scoffing at that. 1,225 yards, 10 touchdowns, right? So really good numbers. But then 2022, he went back up, 108 catches, all right, 1,429 yards, which is ridiculous. Second time he's done that in 3 years, where he's gone over 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns. So the touchdown numbers were his highest in 2022, and his yardage was the second most in his career to that point. And then in 2023, he had the catches, 107. So he was still highly productive, which is why you have to replace him, right? Which is why you have to go out and get a guy, because he's still instrumental in the success of this Bills offense. But the yardage was way down, 1183, which is nothing to scoff at, all right? But for his standards, that's not a great season, right? This is a guy that had 1,535 in 2020 and 1,429 just the year previous, right? So 1183 is not a great number. It's a good number. And if you're a number one wide receiver not named Stefon Diggs, that's a good number one around the league. That's a great season. Not for Stefon Diggs. And then the 8 touchdowns started out like gangbusters. But as we know, down the stretch of that season, he did not have, let's see, what was the last week he had a touchdown in 2023. Let's look at his statistics from the season and see his game logs, and see exactly what he did touchdown wise. He did not have a touchdown after the Philadelphia game in week 12. So after that game against the Eagles, which was a classic, he caught a touchdown pass in that game. He did not have one the final 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks of the season, and then did not have a touchdown in either one of the playoff games. And then 100-yard performances, again, started out the season like gangbusters, did not have a 100-yard receiving game after week 6 against the Giants. Did not eclipse, and I'll take it a step further. He did not have more than 87 yards in any of the games after week 6. So again, started out crazy the first 6 weeks of the season, 500-yard games in the first 6 weeks, and then did not have a 100-yard game after week 6, and did not have a game with more than 87 yards after that first 6 weeks of the season stretch. So again, the numbers really fell off the cliff, and it made it easy for Buffalo to say, you know what? Maybe we can go without Stefon Diggs. They're not saying we can go without him completely. We need a guy to fill that void. But do we need to be paying him the money? Do we need to be putting up, as you mentioned, with his BS? Clearly, the answer is no. Now, what are you going to do to replace him? Now, that's the question. It's going to be via the draft because they're looking for a cheap option. If you're going to try to maximize this roster around Josh Allen's deal, you're going to have to do it via the draft. So it's going to be via the draft. In what capacity? Stay at 28, make a selection, move up in the draft. If I'm Buffalo, I know my window is pretty damn tight. I'm looking to maximize this window by getting a rookie receiver of the caliber of a Stefon Diggs by moving up and hopefully getting that guy that is a difference maker like a Rome Odunze. You're getting essentially the best of both worlds of a Gabe Davis with that size and ability and the ability to run, but you're also getting the production from a Stefon Diggs all in one body if you're able to go out and get a Rome Odunze. So that's just my thought. Zoe Life, No Life. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, Hunter Renfrow will be next Cole Beasley. Book it. I love Hunter Renfrow. I think the world of him. Had a down year last year, dealt with injuries, and when you get a new staff in there and guys don't really value you, I don't think he was ever truly valued the way that he was with Gruden. So a fresh start for him will be really good because I think he's a slot machine in this league. Just needs to stay healthy and stop fumbling the football. Love Hunter Renfrow. Twin D, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Twin D writes, hey, LT, what's up, Twin? Who writes, has there ever been a time when the blue chip quarterback dominance belonged to one conference? The AFC is rough. I don't know if it's ever been this tilted and lopsided before. And I say that, but if you go to the golden age of the NFL, or not the golden age of the NFL, the golden age of the NFC, when they dominated in the early 90s, early to mid 90s, the balance of power was in the NFC. I mean, you probably could go all the way back to really the 80s, but the quarterback play wasn't as strong. Those teams were just better. The 49ers of the 80s, the Redskins of the 80s, the Bears of the 80s were all dominant teams. But the AFC had some teams that could compete, but there was no dominant quarterbacks with those teams that I just mentioned other than Joe Montana. The Redskins won Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks, as we know. The Bears won with Jim McMahon. So again, those aren't what we would classify as big time quarterbacks. So I'm thinking early 90s, when the Cowboys had Troy Aikman, the Packers had Brett Favre, and the 49ers had Steve Young. I think the quarterback tilt was shifted towards the NFC in those days, but there still was Jim Kelly. There still were other passers on other teams that were really prolific. That Warren Moon was with the run and shoot with the Houston Oilers, putting up big numbers. There were other teams that had prolific quarterbacks. I don't know if it was as slanted as it is now. Like the AFC is crazy right now. I mean, when you look at the landscape of the AFC with the quarterback play over there versus the NFC, it's not even close. I mean, you got Allen, Rodgers, Mahomes, Herbert, Watson, if we even want to consider him in this discussion, I guess we probably should. CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I've probably left out one or two guys, right? Tua had a massive season last year. The list goes on and on and on in the AFC. It's ridiculous. That's not what we're doing in the NFC. I don't know if we've ever seen it this lopsided before, but yeah, it's AFC's rough. And this just adds to it, right? Adding another weapon, even though Diggs was already on that side of the bracket, you didn't weaken the Bills and add it to a team that didn't have an opportunity. You just took him from the Bills, which they're going to probably add, a receiver back to that mix to try to offset the loss. And you added it to a team that was already up and coming, that was already rising through the ranks, and you just helped expedite their process, hopefully in their mind's eye, of trying to win a Super Bowl championship. So, yeah, it's crazy right now, man. Let's get to the comment section real quick and knock out a few of these before we get out of here. Let's see. Face Vengeance says Bills Texans finna be a primetime game. And I read that they're playing each other this year. Yeah, I don't know if the schedule makers have already made the schedule, but they're gonna have to fit this one in because this is Sunday night football material right here. So they're gonna either Monday night or Sunday night. This is not a Thursday night affair. This is a primetime Monday or Sunday game. This feels Sunday night football-ish to me. And I don't know if it's in Buffalo or Houston. I think it's in Houston. I'm not sure about that. Let's see. Let's see if we have any more comments. Sean Blake writes, the Bills are eating $35 million in dead cap during a Super Bowl window, trading their best wide receiver. I would love to hear the backstory on Diggs and what he was doing. Well, there's been this. He's been a problem. He's been a malcontent, you would say, for the last 2 years, really. It felt like there was always something hovering around Stefon Diggs. Always rumors. Obviously, he had the situation last year where, there was a little bit of a disturbance during, the offseason. And it's just something you don't want to have to deal with. And you get tired of having to deal with this. And if you're trying to win, there's nothing more important than having some sort of continuity and togetherness within your locker room. Fraction and dysfunction, it's going to tear your team apart from within. It is a destructive force. It's not a secret that teams with guys like T.O., super talented, and could put a team on his back, and we saw him in that run to the Super Bowl with the Eagles. You can't win consistently with guys that are malcontents, the guys that are going to fracture a locker room and force you to decide, are you a part of my clique or their clique, right? You don't want that. You don't want guys that could be divisive. And I'm not telling you that Stefon Diggs was as bad as a Terrell Owens or some of these guys that we've seen be very divisive in their NFL careers, but we know that he can be a malcontent. We know he can be moody. We've seen him snapping off on guys. We've also seen him be very, motivational towards players and hyping them up. But we've also seen him go and attack Josh Allen for not getting the football, attack the offensive coordinator. We've seen him be aggressive towards positional coaches and players because he's not getting the football. So we've seen him in situations be a distraction. He's been a distraction in the offseason many, many times. It was a distraction already this offseason. He didn't play well to end last year. So it made it easier for them to say, you know what? Enough of this. We don't need to deal with this. We don't have to put up with this. And so they're moving on and eating the cap. We've seen teams. Now, this is now commonplace in the NFL. We saw the Eagles once upon a time eat cap to move on from Carson Wentz. We saw just recently the Denver Broncos say, and again, I don't really know all of the particulars of that situation. Sean Payton never liked nor wanted Russell Wilson, which is why I don't understand why he even took the job, because he never wanted Russell Wilson. I don't think he ever liked him. But whatever the case may be, we saw how much they ate to get rid of him. We've seen teams. We saw how much the Steelers ate in cap space to get rid of Antonio Brown. When guys are a malcontent, you can destroy a locker room. And so you move on from guys no matter the cost. For the Bills, in their mind, this may be addition by subtraction. It was becoming too much to bear. And we can go get us a young boy that's going to cost us a fraction of what it cost us to pay you to come in here and play the way that you were playing at the end of last year. Maybe he's about to hit a decline. Who's to say? He could go to Houston and he could go right back to where he was 2024, and he could have 1,400 yards, 107 catches, and 11 touchdowns. Or you could continue to see that slide and he could barely hit 1,000. It could just be sub 1,000 yards. Who knows? They may be out in front of this thing. Either way, they saw an exit. They took it. I'm not mad at them. Now you better go replace him. That's the thing. You better go replace him. All right. So, all right. So I see no more comments. Big deal here in the NFL. Houston has made a statement. They're going for it, man. They're all in. And I love it. Love every bit of it. And they're going to be one fun team to watch this year if CJ Stroud is as advertised. Meanwhile, with the Bills, a lot of questions. We're going to get some answers come April 25th because they're going to attack this in the first round. They'd be a damn fool to try to wait until the second round to address this issue. They're going to attack this either with 28 or they're going to move up to somewhere in the draft and attack this, whether it's to acquire one of the big three, Brian Thomas Jr., I think those are the only guys you probably trade up for in this draft. Otherwise, you wait till 28 and you just see what's available, and you take the guy that you deem to be the best of that group and you move on. And I just got a feeling that guy's going to end up being like Adonai Mitchell if you wait till 28. If I'm Buffalo, I'm not waiting until 28. I'm going up to go get somebody, whether that's Brian Thomas Jr. or that's, Rome Odunze. I got to make it happen. I can't sit on my hands here and just hope that one of these guys at the back end of the first round turns out to be a stud wide receiver. Because again, every year that you wait in Buffalo is a year that window shrinks and gets, smaller and smaller, and it closes and closes even more and more. So you need this rookie to come in and have an immediate impact. And the higher you take a guy in this particular draft with these receivers, the more likely it is you're going to have a guy come in and be able to impact your team right away. But again, we'll see what happens. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, do you think this is a pivotal year for Joe Burrow to stay up amongst the top quarterbacks? I just think he needs to stay healthy. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a pivotal year for him because when he's healthy, he's shown us what he can be. I think he just needs to stay healthy. That's the thing. Nobody questions him when he's healthy. Even look at last year. He had the calf injury in the preseason, or that kind of in camp rather, that hampered him all the way through the early portion of the season. And then look what happened when he got right around like week 3 or 4. They took off. They started winning games. They went to San Francisco, beat the 49ers during that little stretch the 49ers had when they were struggling. And they got back on track. And I told you, I think they were going to come back and win that division. They went on the road on a Thursday night, and they were handling the Baltimore Ravens. I get it. The score was like 10-7 or whatever, but they couldn't stop them that night. They were going to have their way. Joe Burrow was in his bag. And I think he's fine. I don't know if I would call it a pivotal year. He needs to stay healthy. That's what he needs to do. Nobody's questioning what he's capable of. He just got to stay healthy. But I will say this. It'll be interesting to see what the Buffalo Bills do. Very interesting to see what they do. Very, very interesting. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie Tee, here on this Louie Tee Network exclusive, massive blockbuster deal. Stefon Diggs traded to the Houston Texans for 3 selections, including a 2025 second-round pick that the Texans netted from the Minnesota Vikings in this year's trade with the Vikings, allowing the Vikings to get into the first round. So the Bills don't even net a first-round pick for Stefon Diggs. No conditional picks in this deal. They get a second in 2025, a fifth in 2025, and a sixth in 2024 in this upcoming year's draft. So not the haul that people probably thought. And I showed you a graphic of what people were projecting a trade would look like. But this just goes to show you they wanted him gone. They wanted Stefon Diggs gone. They were sick of the distraction, and they're going to have to replace him. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie Tee. You guys get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your day. Leave it down in the comment section. What do you think of this trade? Who won this deal? And what should the Bills do to replace Stefon Diggs? And where does this put the Texans in the AFC arms race as we see teams trying to jockey for position to compete with the Kansas City Chiefs? Where does this put them now? Are they truly in the Super Bowl conversation in the AFC? Leave it down in the comment section. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie Tee. Until next time, you guys have a good one. Take care.